For 2 years and some change, we have been that person that starts a conversation at a party and then totally just straight up walks away. Sorry, it's just they keep refilling the guacamole and, we have to just, sorry, I'll be right back. Comment responses are an impossibly important part of Idea Channel, and a bunch of you have asked if we'd ever go back and respond to comments on old videos. So here we are. That's what we're gonna do. And if you're worried, don't be. We're not gonna do this all the time. But the stuff we talk about on Idea Channel is always gaining new context, always open to new interpretation, and subject to its historical moment. Even Bronies. Especially Bronies. So that being said, we're gonna respond to comments from our top 5 most popular episodes. So for everybody keeping track at home, that's Bronies, Controlling versus Being Your Avatar, You Are Probably a Hipster, Homestuck, and Old Memes Are Old. All but one of which, I think it's worth noting, are where we defend a thing a lot of people really don't like. So then I guess, might as well just dive right in. Quote, tell me what you think in the comments. You, sir, have no idea what you have started. Oh, but I do, Mr. Bombman97. Oh, but I do. Idea Channel has come a long way since this, which was our 7th episode. I had a little bit more hair back then and spoke a little bit slower, and maybe could have been a little bit more thoughtful. Meko xtwisparkle points out that while we talk about the idea that it's complicated to say any one thing is definitely masculine or definitely feminine, we still argue from this premise that based on its characteristics, My Little Pony is definitely a show for little girls. So I think it is worth pointing out that in Talking with Bitch magazine, the show's creator Lauren Faust talks about her aim to kind of rehabilitate the girls show, and she talks about how saying that something is girly or for girls tends to be this cultural shorthand for stupid or not worthwhile, and she wanted to change that. And in the same article, they talk about how, she's successful, but never could have dreamed of this level of success. And I think that's interesting and important context for this whole arrangement of things. Barry Jordan goes in another direction and asks whether or not My Little Pony's wide appeal has something to do with its treatment of childhood as opposed to its gendered aspects, which you could maybe view as a detail of its design. Which I totally get, but I also think it's important to ask questions about when a space is designed for a particular gender, when is it appropriate for other genders to feel like they can enter into it? And I think that you can view the worst parts of the brony community, which I realize might not be a huge number of people by any measure, as a kind of male colonization of a space intended for young women, which is unfortunate given the comparatively fewer spaces made for young women. And I think that's a thing that is worth asking about, something to consider, and something that we should have considered more when making this episode. Angela Lindop writes, the trick with reading Homestuck is to not think about anything too hard, and it actually makes sense in a really roundabout way. If you don't have this idea of what it's for or what it will accomplish, it becomes much easier to enjoy. And incidentally, this is about how I feel regarding Ulysses. It's like a thing that just happens, and when you bring expectation to it, it gets much more difficult. And as Thoreau Kilbourne points out, this is also kind of true of Dark Souls. Dark Souls makes no sense if you're asking questions like, why am I on this quest? Or who are these people? But if you turn off that part of your brain, it is perfect. I think Dark Souls knows it's a video game. All of the questions are answered by mechanics. And if you're asking questions that aren't answered by mechanics, Dark Souls isn't gonna answer them because it doesn't think those questions are even worth asking. Just kill the demons, get the souls. Who cares about the other stuff? Teleport between bonfires. Of course, as TrenchcoatedPsycho seems to imply, there are textual things that you have to put up with, but that there are also these extra textual elements that you have to justify dealing with, like maybe the actions or schedule of a less than benevolent creator, not naming any names. This also applies, I think, in a roundabout way to our controlling versus being your avatar episode. Tessa Bain writes about how the control versus be dichotomy, like most dichotomies, is a false one, and talks about how there's also this sense of being an observer, which is just as applicable to creators as it is to the audience. And this really makes me think about the presence of the creator in all of these things as this third party that feels absent even though they have architected this grand experience. How much is Gabe Newell a part of the Valve games, or Peter Molyneux in the Fable games, or Sid Meier in Civ? And in those games made by those creators, when we feel like we are the character that we are playing, as it seems like a lot of people felt about Gordon Freeman, right? OK Donkey and a bunch of other people wrote about this, that a silent character is one that makes them feel like they are that character. What question do we ask ourselves when the game wants us to do something that we don't want to do? Are we asking, why is the game asking me to do this? Or are we asking, why did the creator or writer of this game ask me to do this? And I think that's an interesting and weird recast of that question that, maybe there's another episode or sort of sequel episode in here. And you would only ever ask these questions of who is making me do this when you feel that connection to your avatar. And as nessesaryschoolthing points out, in games like Civilization, this is really hard to do. And Densoro talks about how when there is no clear illustration and mechanic for the physical boundaries of your thing, like on the screen, it's harder for you to read yourself into it. And right, for Civilization, what even are you? I always thought of myself as the disembodied idea of civilization, which I realize is probably a very weird thing to think. And finally, ArtisticDreams brings up the really good point of, what if those physical parameters are your physical parameters? Like, what if you're in virtual reality and in order to progress GTA 5, you would have to perform all of Trevor's physical actions? Could you even do it? I think this is a great question, and we should definitely do an episode about this before anyone else does. Because I hear when you do things first, you're the coolest. Which brings us to hipsters. So much fear in this comment section. People worried that they might actually be hipsters. It's like the Red Scare, but for a subculture. People are worried that the authority seeking out and judging hipsters is so strong and present that, they're worried they might be a hipster and they don't even know it. Anyone could be a hipster. Your neighbor could be a hipster. Your sister could be a hipster. Call the emergency hotline if you see what you suspect is hipster activity. And it's especially complicated because, as Violet von Tesla and Evelyn W point out, even saying you are not a hipster is to some people proof that you are a hipster. So literally nobody is safe. No one. On the other hand, Will Thornton delivers what I think is the most popular conception of hipsterdom, which is a group of people who don't like things that are popular. And if we do believe that is the case, then I have some bad news for the members of the Internet Cool Kids Club that think that memes are no longer funny when they become popular. Y'all are hipsters. Sorry, I don't write the rules, I just read them. No, but really, the most interesting part of this conversation is the vast gulf between people who think that internet memes are just over, like Damian Benavides. Memes are leaving the internet and really now only thrive in meme-specific apps like iFunny. And the folks who still see them as funny, like GiGi Smith, or useful features of communicating on the internet, like TeresaMcD, who works with kids who love the memes. Regarding which I can't help but think of the exploited and the punk's not dead mantra, right? Like, internet memes are not dead. It's just their original audience sees them as being sucked of their meaning because of their distribution amongst a wider audience and, the changing of that meaning because of that distribution. So, yeah. Oh my God, culture's changing? Ugh. The internet should just stay on the internet, and this whole American greediness of trying to monetize every thing is pushed to the point of oversaturation, hence the gagging reflex of any memes nowadays that are older than a day. Which brings us finally to the Canadian imperialists' saltily worded condemnation of a leaking internet and the critical theory Frankfurt Schoolish idea that American culture and popular culture are essentially the same thing. To which I respond, you mad, bro? Why are you so mad, though? And with that, we come to the conclusion of our first ever full comment response video. I hope that you are not mad, even if you do happen to be a bro. Regardless of your madness or broness, if you have comments on these comments, please leave your comments in the comments. We haven't really figured out what we're gonna do with comments on comments. I don't know if we do a comment response to comment responses, but who knows? We'll figure something out. This week's episode was brought to you by the hard work of these bros who are only sometimes mad. We have a Facebook and IRC and a subreddit, which you should visit and leave comments on because we love comments so much. It's almost like we have a fever and the only cure is medical science and rest, but the comments make us happy. So that's why we ask for them. We think they're neat. We think you're neat. And if you'll excuse me, I see that they have refilled the guacamole.